Listening to understand, not just to respond. One of the most common yet quietly broken rules of communication is this. We often listen not to understand, but to respond. You've likely felt it. You're speaking, explaining something meaningful, and the other person is already crafting their reply, not out of disrespect, but out of habit. It's how most of us were taught to communicate. Reply quickly, have a point, make it count. But real power in a conversation doesn't lie in saying the next thing. It lies in allowing someone to finish theirs. Listening to truly understand means letting go of the urge to be right, clever, or quick. It's about tuning in, not just to the words, but to the way they're said, the pauses, the tension, the pace. That's where the real meaning lies. Take this simple moment. Someone says, "Work's been overwhelming lately." Most of us respond reflexively. Ugh, same here. The focus shifts back to us, but a more generous response is, "What's been going on?" That small change moves the tone from comparison to connection. Psychologically, this kind of listening creates safety. It lowers defenses, builds trust. When people feel truly heard, they don't repeat themselves or raise their voice. They relax, open up, and remember that moment, because they weren't just replied to. They understood. Rest is a strategy, not a reward. In today's productivity-driven world, most people treat rest like something you earn only after the work is done. But psychology tells a different story. Rest isn't a reward, it's a strategy. Our brain and body are not built for endless effort. When we push ourselves without taking breaks, our ability to focus, make decisions, and think creatively begins to decline. Mental energy, like physical energy, has its limits. This leads to cognitive fatigue, where performance drops, mistakes increase, and burnout creeps in. Studies consistently show that short, regular breaks, especially when taken before exhaustion sets in, actually enhance performance. Whether it's a few minutes away from your screen, a walk between tasks, or a full day off, rest allows your brain to reset, refocus, and regain clarity. This isn't limited to desk jobs. Athletes use rest to recover and improve. Musicians and surgeons rely on breaks to maintain precision. Still, in many work cultures, rest is wrongly seen as laziness or something that needs to be justified. Reframing rest as part of the process helps us plan better. It encourages us to build recovery time into our days, rather than packing every moment with productivity. It's not about working less, it's about working smarter. A rested mind makes sharper decisions, handles stress more calmly, and stays emotionally balanced. Rest also fuels long-term motivation. When people see rest as essential fuel instead of a prize for finishing, they remain consistent and avoid burnout. They don't wait until they're drained to rest. They recharge before hitting empty. In both psychology and performance science, rest isn't what happens after the work. It's what makes the work possible. It's not just the pause at the end. It's the power source that sustains the journey. Give presence, not just presents. Imagine someone handing you a beautifully wrapped gift, but while doing so, they're looking at their phone, barely engaged. You might appreciate the present, but you'll likely notice what's missing, their full attention. That's the heart of giving presence, not just presence. True care isn't just in what we give, it's in how we show up. In psychology, presence communicates validation. When someone sets aside distractions, maintains eye contact, and genuinely listens, they're saying, "You matter right now." While gifts and material items can be meaningful, research consistently shows that emotional attunement, being fully present, has a far deeper and longer-lasting impact on relationships. Presence builds trust. It creates emotional safety and helps others feel seen and heard. In daily life, this might look like turning off your notifications at dinner, not multitasking while someone's sharing something meaningful, or simply listening without rehearsing your next response in your mind. These invisible gestures often mean more than any physical item because they create warmth that can't be faked or replaced. Being fully present also benefits the giver. When we're engaged, our own stress levels drop, our empathy increases, and our sense of connection deepens. Giving attention isn't just kindness, it's a form of emotional regulation. That's why the moments we remember most aren't always tied to objects, but to experiences. Someone listening without judgment, an unhurried conversation, a quiet moment where time felt suspended. These memories aren't just felt, they're stored. Long after the physical gifts are forgotten, It's the presence that remains. Laugh at yourself before anyone else can. You trip over your feet in front of a crowd. It's awkward. Everyone sees it. But then you crack a smile and say, "And that's why I never became a dancer." Suddenly, people aren't laughing at you. They're laughing with you. That's the essence of laughing at yourself before anyone else can. This approach uses self-deprecating humor, and when done thoughtfully, it's a powerful psychological and social tool. In psychology, this kind of humor helps reduce embarrassment and build connection. When you acknowledge your own misstep with lightness, you disarm the situation. You remove the sting and signal that you're in control, not the mistake. It communicates confidence, not insecurity. Laughing at yourself shows others that you're not fragile. It eases tension and makes people feel more comfortable around you because they no longer feel like they have to avoid the topic or protect your feelings. This is especially helpful in situations that feel publicly uncomfortable, misspeaking during a presentation, spilling something in a meeting, or fumbling through an answer. A quick joke or a light comment can create psychological safety both for yourself and those watching. But like any tool, it needs balance. The goal isn't to constantly put yourself down or hide your capabilities. It's to show that you can be human without being defensive. The laughter isn't meant to shrink you. It's meant to help you own the moment before the moment owns you. In this way, laughing at yourself becomes an act of emotional agility. You're transforming potential shame into shared amusement, which in turn builds trust and makes you more relatable. After all, people rarely remember perfection. They remember how you handled the stumble. Aim for win-win, not win-lose. Most people approach disagreements with a win-lose mindset. If one side gains, the other must lose. But that assumption limits what's possible. It ignores the opportunity for both sides to walk away satisfied. Win-win isn't just a business buzzword. It's grounded in human behavior and psychology. It values cooperation over competition, long-term just over short-term victories. At its heart, win-win is about solving problems in a way that benefits everyone. Imagine two roommates arguing over who gets the bigger bedroom. If one insists on winning, the other walks away resentful. But if they shift the approach, say, one gets the larger room but pays more rent, or the other gets a better closet or office space, it's not perfect, but both feel seen and respected. This mindset taps into our core needs: fairness, autonomy, and the desire to be considered. People become more collaborative when they feel heard, and more generous when they're not being pressured. Win-win thinking also sparks creative ideas, solutions that wouldn't appear if the only goal was to win the argument. Over time, this builds trust. When people see you consistently aiming for mutual benefit, they're more likely to do the same. And relationships start to thrive, not because they're forced to, but because it's natural. Of course, win-win doesn't come easily. It requires empathy, effort, and a willingness to understand the other side. But when it works, it does more than resolve the moment. It transforms how others see you. Timing matters more than truth. You can say something completely true, but if you say it at the wrong moment, it may do more harm than good. That's the idea behind timing that matters more than truth. In both psychology and daily life, what you say often matters less than when you say it. This isn't about lying or hiding important facts. It's about understanding emotional readiness. When someone is emotionally raw, overwhelmed, upset, or exhausted, they may not be able to process even the most thoughtful or well-intentioned feedback. In that moment, truth can feel like criticism, not support. For example, after someone receives bad news, you might feel compelled to offer perspective with a phrase like, "Everything happens for a reason," or "You'll come out stronger." While sincere, these phrases, when said too soon, can come off as dismissive. The person is still deep in their emotional experience. They're not ready to zoom out and reflect. Psychologically, this ties into how our brains regulate emotion. We need time to calm down before we can absorb complex or abstract ideas. Sharing insight with someone who's still emotionally flooded usually won't help. They'll react defensively instead of reflectively. This is especially true in conflict. Offering an honest critique in the middle of an argument may be truthful, but it won't be effective. Waiting until both people are calm dramatically increases the likelihood of being heard and understood. Knowing when to speak is a skill. It means reading the emotional tone of a moment, recognizing when someone is still processing, and choosing to pause rather than push. Because even the most helpful truth needs the right emotional conditions to take root. Kindness is doing, not just offering. Many people want to be kind, and they often say things like, "Let me know if you need anything," or "I'm here if you want to talk." While these words come from a good place, they rarely translate into real action. That's where the idea comes in. Kindness isn't about offering help. It's about doing something helpful. From a psychological perspective, simply offering support feels good to the person saying it. It gives a sense of having been kind. But for someone who's overwhelmed or going through a tough time, vague offers can feel like another problem to solve. They have to figure out what they need, how to ask, and whether it's okay to reach out, often making them feel like a burden. Kindness becomes more meaningful when it skips the offering phase and jumps straight into action. Instead of saying, "Let me know if you need anything," show up with a warm meal. Send them a thoughtful playlist. Water their plants. These small but concrete gestures are much easier to receive, and they carry far more emotional weight. This concept connects to what psychologists call social friction, the small mental or emotional barriers that make it harder for people to accept help. Vague offers add friction by putting the responsibility back on the person who's already struggling, while specific acts of kindness remove that barrier entirely. This principle also applies in group dynamics. Suggesting that someone should check in is much less helpful than just being the one who does. While kind words have their place, real relief comes from tangible actions. People feel genuinely cared for when kindness is visible, physical, and low pressure. And it's not about how big the gesture is. It's about the fact that someone noticed and chose to act without needing to be asked. That's when kindness truly resonates. Compliment effort, not just outcome. When someone achieves something impressive, it's easy to respond with praise like, "You're so talented," or "That turned out perfectly." But there's a deeper, more meaningful kind of compliment, one that focuses not just on what was achieved, but on the effort it took to get there. This approach is grounded in growth mindset theory, developed by psychologist Carol Dweck, which explains how people respond to success and failure based on the kind of feedback they receive. When we praise only the result, people can start to equate their self-worth with outcomes, things they can't always control. But when we recognize the effort behind the result, we encourage resilience, persistence, and long-term motivation. For example, if a student gets a high grade and you say, "You must be really smart," the praise focuses on a fixed trait. But saying, "You must have worked really hard on this," shifts the focus to the process, strategy, time, and focus, all of which they chose to apply. This shift matters because not all outcomes reflect the full story. Someone might put in tremendous work and still fall short. Recognizing effort tells them their input was valuable, regardless of the end result. It builds confidence based on what they can control, rather than luck or natural ability. And this applies far beyond school. Telling a friend, "I can see how much thought you put into this," or a colleague, "I noticed how carefully you handled that situation," affirms their intentional actions, not just the visible success. Effort-based praise nurtures emotional well-being and reinforces the value of trying, learning, and showing up with intention, even when the final outcome is still unfolding. Keep your humor fresh. A joke might get a laugh once, but by the third time, it earns little more than an eye roll. That's because humor thrives on surprise, and repetition kills it. Psychologically, this ties into a concept called habituation, where the brain starts tuning out what it's already seen or heard before. A fresh, unexpected joke engages the brain's attention and reward systems, while a stale one fades into background noise. But this isn't just about punchlines. It applies to your tone, timing, and even the self-deprecating remarks you rely on too often. Repeating the same jokes or comments, whether at work, in conversation, or online, may feel safe and familiar, but it risks turning into a routine performance rather than a genuine connection. People laugh not only because something is funny, but because it feels present, timely, and real. Keeping humor fresh doesn't mean being clever all the time. It means being attentive. Noticing the small, absurd, in-the-moment details that you and someone else just experienced together. That's where the most meaningful laughter comes from. Think of humor more like improv than a stand-up routine. You're responding to what's happening now, not recycling greatest hits. That's why some friends can make you laugh endlessly. Not because they memorize jokes, but because they're present with you. So when your humor starts to feel automatic, it may be time to update your lens. What worked before might not fit anymore, and that's okay. Let your humor evolve with you. Staying funny isn't about repeating yourself. It's about staying real, attentive, and using humor as a bridge to connection, not just entertainment. Coach in private, praise in public. Most people don't enjoy being corrected in front of others. even if the feedback is well-intentioned. But nearly everyone appreciates being acknowledged and celebrated when others are watching. That's the idea behind coaches in private, praise in public. This approach is built on two essential emotional needs: dignity and recognition. Psychologically, receiving criticism, even constructive, can feel like a threat when it happens in a public setting. It activates concerns about social status and belonging. Being called out, even gently, in front of others can feel exposing or humiliating. When feedback is delivered privately, however, it allows the person to reflect, ask questions, and absorb the message without the added pressure of an audience. Whether it's a manager guiding an employee, a teacher correcting a student, or a friend offering tough advice, private settings preserve self-respect and allow for honest growth. On the flip side, public praise serves as powerful reinforcement. It boosts morale, highlights valued behavior, and strengthens social bonds. A public thank you or shout-out not only uplifts the individual, but sets a visible standard for others. Psychologists call this social reinforcement, the idea that positive behavior is more likely to be repeated when it's recognized by others. For instance, if a team member handles a difficult client well, praising them in front of the group doesn't just reward them. It also shows the team what great work looks like. Together, private coaching and public praise strike a healthy balance. They create an environment where people feel safe to improve while feeling seen for their progress. In workplaces, classrooms, and even personal relationships, this balance builds trust and strengthens connection, turning ordinary teams into high-functioning, high-trust ones. Own your slice of the mess. This idea comes from conflict resolution and behavioral psychology. In almost any disagreement, responsibility is rarely one-sided. Yet progress often stalls when both people focus only on defending themselves. A better approach is to begin by acknowledging your own part, even if it's small. This softens tension and sets the tone for a more constructive conversation. Psychologically, this taps into the principle of reciprocity. When one person takes responsibility or shows vulnerability, the other is more likely to respond in kind. It shifts the energy from confrontation to cooperation. In practice, this might look like saying, "I realize I interrupted you earlier, and that probably didn't help," instead of opening with, "You misunderstood me." That small act of ownership changes the conversation. It shows maturity, reduces defensiveness, and builds trust. This strategy also applies to personal relationships. Telling a partner, "I got defensive, and I shouldn't have," often makes it easier for them to reflect on their own behavior. Even if you believe the other person was more at fault, acknowledging your slice first creates space for growth. Owning your slice doesn't mean taking all the blame. It means leading with what you can control. It sends a message: "I'm here to understand, not just to win." And that alone can turn a deadlock into a breakthrough. Prioritize presence over pings. You're deep in a conversation when your phone lights up. It's just a glance, nothing urgent, but somehow something shifts. Your focus splinters. This is what psychologists call attention residue. A part of your mind stays stuck on what you just saw or heard, even if you've returned to the conversation. The brain doesn't truly multitask. It simply switches rapidly, and in doing so, loses depth and connection. Prioritizing presence over pings means choosing to be fully where you are, not just physically, but mentally. In an era where notifications, group chats, and updates constantly compete for our attention, presence has become a rare and powerful act. Research shows that people feel more valued when they're heard without distraction. No glancing at screens. No half-listening. Just focus. Being present sends a message: "You matter enough for me to pause everything else." That doesn't mean ignoring responsibilities or never checking your phone. It means being intentional. If you're in a conversation, silence your alerts. If you're working, block time for deep focus. If you're alone, give your mind space without instantly filling it with noise. Presence isn't just polite, it's transformative. It deepens connection, improves memory, and even reduces stress. In a world built to distract, choosing full attention is a quiet rebellion. It says, "This moment deserves my whole self," not the fragmented version, but the part of me that listens, notices, and stays. Don't tease someone who's already shrinking. Some jokes bring people together. Others land like a quiet slap. Teasing is often seen as playful bonding, but when someone is already feeling small, self-conscious, or unsure, it can backfire. That's the essence of not teasing someone who's already shrinking. In social dynamics, context matters more than content. A joke that's harmless in one setting can feel deeply hurtful in another, especially when it touches on something someone is already struggling with. Psychologically, people who feel insecure are often in a defensive state. Their internal voice is already full of self-doubt. A teasing comment doesn't disrupt that inner critic, it echoes it. You might see it in a group setting. Someone stumbles while speaking, and instead of support, they get teased. The group laughs, but the person being teased? Their shoulders tense. Their voice quiets. They retreat. The moment seems small, but its impact is real. While others move on, that person often carries it with them. Teasing only feels safe when there's emotional balance and mutual trust. When someone feels secure and included, they can laugh at themselves because they know they're not under threat. But when someone is already pulling away, socially, emotionally, or physically, a joke at their expense adds pressure, not connection. Psychological safety means knowing when to joke and when to hold back. It requires empathy, not hypersensitivity. Because the goal isn't to toughen people up, it's to create a space where they don't have to be tough all the time. Mirror feelings first, fixes can wait. Imagine a friend says, "I'm just so tired of everything right now." Your first instinct might be to jump in with solutions, maybe get more sleep, or take a vacation. It's natural to want to help. But at that moment, what they really need isn't advice, it's understanding. The principle of mirror feelings first, fixes can wait is simple yet powerful. When someone shares emotional struggles, their first need is validation, not direction. That means reflecting their feelings back to them, gently, clearly, and without rushing to solve the problem. You're not repeating their words, but recognizing the emotion. If someone says, "I feel stuck," you might respond, "That sounds really frustrating." No advice, just empathy. This response lowers emotional resistance. When someone feels seen and heard, they're more open to conversation and, eventually, to problem solving. If you skip this step and go straight to fixing, it can feel dismissive even if your intentions are good. Psychologically, this taps into our basic need for emotional validation, the assurance that what we're feeling makes sense to someone else. When that happens, the brain calms down, making it easier to think clearly and engage constructively. Mirroring feelings isn't complex, but it requires attention. You're not just listening to words, you're picking up on tone, energy, and emotional cues. It's about pausing before you plan. And that small pause can completely shift the direction of a conversation for the better. Step aside without being asked. You don't need a sign to know when you're in someone's way. Whether you're standing near a store entrance, blocking a sidewalk, or hovering too long in a doorway, learning to step aside without being asked is one of the most basic and powerful forms of social awareness. This behavior reflects what psychologists call prosocial behavior, small actions that benefit others. These aren't dramatic or showy gestures. They're simple adjustments, like noticing someone trying to get by and making space for them. And while they seem minor, they rely on a deeper skill, situational awareness. Situational awareness is about paying attention to your environment. Who looks like they're in a hurry? Who's trying to pass? How much space are you taking up? When you move out of the way before someone has to say anything, you're not just being polite, you're making life a little easier for someone else. You're solving a problem they were probably too uncomfortable to voice. This kind of small courtesy can also trigger reciprocal altruism, the tendency for people to pay kindness forward when they receive it. One subtle step to the side can start a ripple effect of cooperation. It doesn't need to be noticed or praised, but it adds ease to the shared spaces we all move through. Being tuned into your surroundings doesn't mean being overly self-conscious. It just means being mindful of the fact that everyone is trying to get somewhere. These quiet, respectful choices, the ones that don't draw attention, are often what create the smoothest, kindest environments. Stepping aside might not seem like much, but it's a small act of grace that keeps the world moving more gently. Decline like you'd want to be declined. Nobody likes being turned down, but how that "no" is delivered can change everything. That's the idea behind declining like you'd want to be declined. It's rooted in empathy, the act of treating someone the way you'd hope to be treated if the roles were reversed. A cold or vague "I can't" can feel like rejection of the person, not just the request. But a thoughtful response like "Thanks for thinking of me, right now I can't, but I'd love to be part of it another time," sends the same message with care and clarity. It's honest, but it's also respectful. Whether in work, friendships, or social invitations, the tone of a decline matters. Warm, specific responses help preserve trust. They show that even when you're drawing a boundary, the relationship still matters. And by responding with kindness, you model how you'd want others to treat you in return. Psychologically, this approach also helps break the cycle of people-pleasing. It proves that setting boundaries doesn't have to come off as cold or guilt-ridden. It can be compassionate and clear. Saying no is a part of life, but when done with empathy, it becomes more than just a refusal. It becomes a moment of dignity, respect, and emotional maturity. And that's what people truly remember. Pass the praise, hold the fault. When things go well, it's tempting to take the credit. When they don't, the instinct is often to look for someone else to blame. But in strong relationships and effective leadership, a better rule applies. Pass the praise, hold the fault. Psychologically, this reflects how people respond to fairness and trust. When someone takes full credit for success without acknowledging others, it can stir resentment. But when praise is shared generously, when teammates, collaborators, or supporters are highlighted, it fosters connection, motivation, and belonging. On the other hand, when mistakes happen, holding the fault means taking ownership before pointing fingers. This taps into what psychologists call an internal locus of control, the belief that we are responsible for our actions, even in difficult situations. It's not about accepting blame for everything. It's about being accountable for your role, especially when others are watching how you respond under pressure. For example, a manager who says, "The team did an amazing job. This was their win," builds morale. If something goes wrong and they say, "That's on me. I should have seen that coming," they build credibility. This kind of leadership encourages openness and honesty. It tells people that success will be shared and mistakes won't be weaponized. This principle isn't just for workplaces. In friendships, families, and communities, giving credit freely and owning your missteps shows maturity. It reminds others that praise isn't a competition and accountability isn't weakness. These behaviors cultivate trust and cooperation, and people remember who had their back when things went right and who stood tall when things went wrong. Voice notes beat texts. A simple word like "sure" in a text can mean excitement, sarcasm, frustration, or indifference, depending entirely on how it's interpreted. The words may stay the same, but tone carries the weight of meaning. That's exactly why voice notes often speak louder and clearer than text messages. In moments where emotions run deep or the context is delicate, tone becomes essential. Text, though convenient, strips away the subtle cues that bring communication to life. Psychologists refer to these cues, like pitch, pace, pauses, and emphasis, as paralinguistic signals. These are the elements that shape how a message feels, not just what it says. Voice notes bring those layers back. A gentle tone can soften a hard truth. A pause can signal reflection. A sigh can say what words can't. These small vocal nuances help reduce misunderstandings, especially during sensitive conversations. They add warmth, sincerity, and presence to a message, reminding the receiver, "This matters enough for me to say it aloud." Not every conversation needs a voice note, of course. But when stakes are high, emotions are mixed, or clarity is crucial, speaking offers something typing can't: connection. In digital communication, it's not just about saying the right thing, but making sure it feels right too. And often, your voice is the most humane way to do that. You're stuck in bumper-to-bumper traffic, running late, tension rising. Then someone turns on their signal, asking to merge. You pause. Do you let them in or close the gap? It's a split-second choice, but from a psychological standpoint, it matters more than it seems. Letting one car in might feel insignificant, but it's a tiny act that helps keep social order alive. Psychologists call this prosocial behavior, decisions made to help others without expecting anything in return. You're not gaining money or recognition, but you are reinforcing a subtle, powerful norm: cooperation. In high-stress environments like busy roads or cities, these norms can quickly break down. But each small moment of courtesy, like letting a driver merge, pushes back against that erosion. This kind of behavior shows empathy. It says, "I see you. Your need matters too." And it plays into something deeper: reciprocity, the human tendency to mirror kindness when it's shown to us. Remarkably, research shows that even witnessing small cooperative acts like this can lower stress and increase our sense of connection. It doesn't just apply to traffic. Holding a door, giving someone space, or letting a person speak. These small gestures aren't just politeness. They're quiet investments in mutual respect. One kind act may not change the world, but moment by moment, they shape a culture that values dignity. So yes, letting that one car in may be a small thing, but it's one more thread holding civilization together.